Hey friends, thanks for joining the Above Board podcast where we talk about life, finances, and everything in between. I'm John Kennedy, one of your hosts, and sorry, by the way, for the couple of weeks of lag time and delay between the last podcast to now. We've had some life happen, but all is well. And in this conversation, I want to talk with you about the limits that you believe you're capable of achieving and why you have this proverbial ceiling placed on yourself. So self-imposed limits are most likely not that self-informed at all. They're actually, if you think about it, they're informed through years of society and other people telling you what to believe. I heard this quote from another podcast recently, and this was kind of the inspiration for this session today, where the speaker said that our beliefs are watered down by the environment we live in. You don't have limits, you have what you have been told your limits are, and you have chosen to believe in those limits. So that was powerful for me. If we break this down, like at what point do we go from being these little kids dreaming big to cautious adults now second guessing every single move that we make? I mean, if you think about it, like when we're children, people encourage the wildest dreams of kids. You want to be an astronaut, a Major League Baseball player, the president of the United States. Great, chase it. You can do it. You can do anything you put your mind to. And then something shifts. Maybe it's around middle school. It definitely is around high school. Suddenly, those same people who told you that anything was possible, they start to tell you to be realistic. Now, being realistic isn't inherently bad. I think it's good to prepare, but who gets to define realistic for you, and why does that definition shrink as we grow older? For me, this really hit when I realized how much of my path was being shaped by external voices, people who didn't know my full potential, but yet they had no problem telling me what they felt like my limits should be. And I see this all the time around me, especially in career choices. And they'll say well-intended things like, you should think about your future. What are you going to major in college? You need a stable job, or that's too risky. But what kind of crap pressure is that, by the way? When you think about like, you got to figure out what you're going to major in. I majored in finance, yes, and I do personal finances for a living. But guess what? I have learned nearly everything I know about finance through personal experiences, client experiences, and through all of my CFP studies. All of that happened, by the way, after I graduated from college. So what I should have probably done is taken a marketing course or a public speaking course or a psychology course for the work that I really do with folks. So I mentioned risk a moment ago too. So let's talk about this one, because let's be honest, every major life decision comes with risk. But here's the thing, most people project their own fear of risk onto you. They aren't really saying you can't do something. What they're saying is they couldn't see themselves doing it, and then therefore they don't believe it's possible. So they assume it must not be possible for you either. Quick story, when Matt and I started our company, the amount of people who said, "Are you sure this is a good idea?" Like, guys, it was more than just a few. And then there were the people who actually said it to my face, but then there were the people who didn't say it to me, but definitely said it about me and behind my back. And word got back to me. I heard things like, these guys know what they're doing. They'll be out of business in 2 years. That one right there, I wrote that down, that they'll be out of business in 2 years. I wrote that down. I actually still look at it to this day. It's actually not out of bitterness, but because I want to remember that people will always try to place their limits onto you. And as much as I love using this example, like I'm some kind of like shining beacon of what to do. Let me be clear. I am not always able to turn like negativity into motivation. It's hard to do that. But that's why that quote hit me so hard the other day. So I'm going to repeat it for those of you in the back of the room, what I started with, which is you don't have limits. You have what you've been told your limits are, and you have chosen to believe those limits. So let me ask you a question. How far back do you have to go to find that moment when someone first told you what your limits were? Maybe it was when you were younger and it came from like a teacher or a coach. They told you to be more realistic. Or maybe it was when you made your first career decision and someone warned you that your dreams were not practical. Now, I'm not saying that people were being malicious. Sometimes they mean well. Sometimes they genuinely believe they're helping you. It doesn't mean they're right, though. One of the best things you can do for yourself is to take an inventory of where your beliefs come from. Ask yourself these two questions. Did I set this limit or was it given to me? That's the first question. The second one is, am I still hanging around with these people who pass along these self-imposed limits? Now, here's the hard part. I'll be honest. This doesn't mean that you get to like snap your fingers and undo years of conditioning overnight. But what you can do is you can start to change your environment and challenge these limits in real time. So here's an exercise. The next time you catch yourself thinking, I can't do that, stop and ask yourself, says who? If it's coming from an actual hard physical limitation, like I can't run a 4-minute mile because, well, I physically can't do it. Yeah, that's one thing. But most of our limits aren't real. They're habits of thought. They're narratives that we've accepted. So how do you start breaking out of them? I think the first thing is hanging out with people who challenge those limits. Spend time around people who think bigger than you. I've said this 1,000 times on this podcast. I'll never stop saying it, but you're the average of the 5 people you hang out with the most. So level up. And the second thing is take small risks to maybe prove yourself wrong. If you think I can never start a business, maybe start a small side hustle. If you think I'm terrible at public speaking, well, force yourself to speak up in a meeting. Start small, build some confidence. Hey guys, as we're wrapping today's podcast, I just want you to ask yourself, what's one thing you've accepted as truth about you, but might not actually be true at all? Identify that one belief and explore if that's actually yours or if it's somebody else's belief that they placed onto you. And take one small action to challenge it. That's it. You might not be able to dunk a basketball or run a 4-minute mile. I can't do either of those things, but I'm sure there are things that you can do to break out of the cycle of negative self-talk and beliefs. On behalf of Rich, myself, and Matt Marcoux, thanks as always for joining the Above Board podcast. We'll catch you next week. See ya.